Hej og velkommen i salen derude, som man vel siger. Vi livestreamer i dag fra Lifestyle og Design Cluster i forbindelse med, at vi har været i en studietur i Silicon Valley i efteråret med en række virksomheder, vidensinstitutioner, brancheorganisationer osv. Og til det har vi lavet et lille recap, og det har vi bedt CBS om at komme og fortælle lidt om. Vi kommer til at køre chancen på engelsk, da vi jo oplever, at vores livsstil- og designbranche er en international verden, så måske skulle jeg også have taget det her på engelsk. Men we take it as we go-agtigt. Jeg tror ikke, jeg har så meget andet at sige, at den her video bliver tilgængelig efterfølgende, og vi eftersender materiale. Der er en rapport på baggrund af det, vi fortæller i dag, både på dansk og på engelsk, så på den måde kan I få adgang til materialet senere. Men velkommen til. Mogens, vil du ikke kort præsentere dig selv?
Jo, ganske kort, så kan jeg sige, at jeg hedder Mogens Bjerre, and I'm a associate professor at CBS. Been with CBS for about 20 years, been working with retailing for quite a lot of years, and took the chance of joining the trip in October last year, where we actually tried to get an idea about what kind of trends are we seeing out there, and how do they actually manifest themselves in a physical form. So what we did was that we had a very intense 5 days where we basically took a tour down, not memory lane, but down history lane, facilitated by a presenter called Jim Crawford. And Jim has been working with retailing for quite some years, and basically one of his key messages was, things take time. So he actually took us through some ideas about what has happened and also what kind of trends are we seeing out there. And his take on this was actually that one of the points that we saw again and again and again is that it's all about people, people, people. You can do with technology what you want, but if the technology doesn't support what's going on for the individual employee or customer, it doesn't really make a difference. So I actually think that he gave us a lot of comfort in the sense that there are opportunities out there to create new and exciting value propositions using tech, but also using common sense. And that came through quite a lot as we saw it. In the aftermath of the trip, I had the pleasure of trying to collect impressions from all participants, and also to try to give an idea about what happened as we went along. So there's a report of approximately 50 pages that documents what took place, but also the key takeaways as we saw them. And we sort of concentrated the takeaways in an overriding idea about what trends did we see, and then we broke it down into service as a business model, which was one that we saw in many retail organizations, that service, the concept of service, is becoming more and more the key management focus rather than products, etc. Technology as a driver for mass customization was also a key one, where we actually saw the idea that the more we can customize or actually personalize, the better it will be in the future. So we will see a future where the individual customer is truly an individual, and you may not see it right now, but if you look to the shirt I'm wearing, it's actually a mass customized tailored one, in the sense that there's a retailer that has my measurements, so when I order new shirts, I just go online and say I want 2 of those and 2 of those and 2 of those, and basically that problem has been solved. It is individual, it would not fit to any of you in the room. And finally, we saw this idea about the opportunities of companies becoming citizens again. For me, it's kind of interesting to see that this is going on, because it's actually a thing that we saw some 30 years ago, where IBM pioneered the idea of the corporate citizen. But we're seeing that companies are becoming in the wake of the CSR wave, corporate social responsibility, that takes shape in many, many forms. It's anything from providing fair prices to raw materials manufacturers, to treating your employees okay, to open stores in neighborhoods where other people will not open stores, so you help change the neighborhood, and on the far side, even helping ex-convicts to jobs and education. So we see a wide variety of CSR stamps all over there, which leads to the key word, which is transparency, namely that any customer can follow what's going on, from raw material to processing, etc. So We can see that the idea about who's making money, where and how is actually something which is being shared. And then finally, on the side, we visited a number of innovation hubs, and it was quite interesting to see that innovation hubs have become a business of themselves. So we will see business hubs focusing on technology and others on retailing, others on services, but they actually try to sort of mimic the idea that we are focusing right here. And now I'm nodding to my beautiful assistant. Some of the things that we saw was actually this idea about new value propositions, but also that technology is adding competence to the individual store staff. So this idea that I will know more about you as a customer, I know your history, I know where you came from, I might even know what's in your cupboard. So I might actually know what kind of jewelry you have bought in the past. We have a participant from the jewelry business. And that could actually be a way to sort of look at, what would I suggest you to buy next time? Or if I look into seeing you as a customer in a fashion store, an apparel store with clothes, then I might know what you have in your cupboard from the past. So I might actually know something about what could I suggest to update your wardrobe and give you suggestions. And that's what we mean by AI and machine learning, that we actually saw that get inspired what they're doing, but don't copy them. There's a lot of opportunities to find other ways of letting technology act for you. One of the things that is certainly being used in all stores is the idea that you will be able to see the store as a way where you can test products, you can see them physically, so the store is sort of changing towards a showroom-like facility, not necessarily a place where you buy stuff, because you can buy online and you can have it delivered within the hour, or even further than that. Another thing which I think is Silicon Valley specific is this whole idea about innovation. But it's also the idea that people mix and walk around. So it's also job-wise that we see ideas being transformed from one sector to another one. And the innovation sort of thinking was captured by one of our presenters, Jim Crawford, who basically said, the biggest problem with you guys, and he was speaking to us as participants, is you think like retailers or manufacturers. You don't think like IT people. If you were thinking like IT people, you would understand that the concept that you're working with is never finished. There's always a better version of it tomorrow. So instead of trying to get it right and thinking and doing analysis to do this, then you might actually be in a situation where you should work with how can we optimize, how can we improve the existing facilities, and where is it that our customers tell us they have issues with the way we do things. And then customer value, we saw that Jeff Bezos from Amazon was quoted quite a few times on the fact that I have an obsession for customer focus. And this obsession for customer focus was one that came through in all the concepts we met. It was never what can we do, it was always what do you want? How can we improve this? How can we make it better as such? And actually it was Amazon that had this element of the value pyramid that you will be able to see in the report, maybe also here, where you actually work with, of course you have to fulfill functional needs, but you also have to be able to speak into the emotional needs, and then when you're really doing something, then actually it's social impact on the individual level. So somewhat similar to Maslow's without being the same as such. Mm-hmm. The last thing I think is worth noting is the idea that you might be able to qualify the individual employee in a better way by using technology. So you can actually have the customer access to technology vis-a-vis the employee, and together you can actually help each other improve things. That could be knowledge about fabrics, materials, but it could also be stories about where do we come from and where's this particular design coming from, what did the designer think when he or she designed it. So what was the idea behind whatever we see? So getting access to that kind of material, so you help the individual customer tell the story in their own words about why they did whatever they did. some of the impacts that we see actually is that the store is changing its role. And I think this is an important point for any retailer to see that this actually has a huge impact on the total supply chain and whatever is behind the scenes, so to speak. So imagine that what we're seeing is that the store is moving from being a place where you go in, you don't know what you want. You talk to an employee, you figure out what you want, you try it on, you choose it maybe in different colors, and then you go out of the store with the product in your hand. To what we saw, this is going to change. The store will be a place where you go in and you get an idea about what you can buy, not in the store, but online. You can test it, meaning that you can actually get the physical shirt or whatever on in the right size, maybe have adaptations made to you so it actually fits you, and then you decide how many you want, and then you order it, and depending on the speed of the supply chain behind the scene, you will have it delivered an hour later, 4 hours later, the next day, or something like that. But speed is something that is very, very important. So what we can actually see is that we're moving from a place where you sell stuff to showrooms. You actually get into dialogues with people, so the opportunity here is to have the conversation going, maybe with other customers. So it could also be that we see the stores are becoming meeting places. Coffees are shared, waters is available, etc. And we also saw quite a few examples of co-design where customers actually participate in design of solutions. And I think this is only the beginning, because what we saw was that some of the customers would have designed whatever up front, come into the store and present it. But there might be opportunities to have a process in which we actually work with co-design over time. So you might involve customers in design in a long period of time. So delivery and technology to support again, which we have seen. And then the information about the total supply chains. So this transparency, or the good citizenship, actually is a key to see how do we treat everybody, how do we behave, down to the place that if we are delivering stuff to individuals, we deliver by electric cars or by bikes or whatever. So our impact of your impact of whatever you bought is minimized. So this perspective of thinking that we can actually help you do other things. The consequence in terms of assortment is that the width of the assortment will increase, so the number of SKUs will go up, but the number of the individual SKU will drop. So depth will actually be decreased. It's quite interesting to see that this is a tendency that everybody thinks is going there. And then they basically speak about, we don't know where you came into our system, but no matter what platform you're going to use, store, online, mobile, computer, we will be able to meet you in the way you like to be met. So this constant focus on the customer's perspective, and then actually going into the idea that, the purpose is we want to help you get a better solution to your need. That's why we're here.
Would you elaborate on a case, because I know the people watching online have a little bit difficulty watching the slides. Mm-hmm. Could you give an example of one of the places that we visited?
We have a picture down here from Levi's, the tailor shop where we actually can have your Levi's trousers tailored to your needs on the spot, meaning that you go into the store and say, this is the one I like, and how fast can you help me do that? And we're speaking half an hour. So it's something where you actually continue browsing, or you can walk to another store and come back. So this idea about something made for you, and now some of the other stores that we visited actually speak about that they have a choice of how fast do you want it, and who's going to deliver it. What delivery mode would you like? Would you like a delivery mode which has no CO2 impact, or would you like delivery mode that's just fast? So the customer is becoming a co-decision maker in a lot of issues. So on the positive side, we saw before that we would see changes in the store, but we will also see that we will see fewer perhaps, but at least smaller stores. So the need for space is simply smaller when you're not a storage facility as well in the future. So this might open for new types of locations where you don't have the same need for space. It might open for more agile locations where you can actually pop up in many more cases than we have seen in the past. And then what's really interesting, at least to somebody that works with marketing, is to see that one of the conclusions is you don't have to make everybody happy. Focus on the segments and the customer types where you have the upper hand and have a value proposition that is attractive to them, and forget the rest. So the other thing that we see about all this is actually this focus on choosing where to provide value and to who to provide value. So a lot of the discussions that we saw in the stores was actually exactly this sign up here: one size does not fit all, because nobody takes it as a responsibility to help everybody. Now, it is a big city phenomenon, probably, but I think it's important to note that this is actually something that we saw in many of the different cases. And then we also see that some of the stores actually extend the range to outside activities. I think this is a picture from Lululemon, a yoga and sports brand that basically does classes outside. So you're not confined to the store to do value. You can create activities with your brand. You can have people engaging with brands far away from your stores, which is also another way of thinking that you're not confined to the store anymore. And I think that's a key perspective to see here. This means, though, that you'll probably continue to be looking for locations with high traffic density. So what we call high footfall will be interesting. And then you'll be looking for employees that like to have a dialogue with their customers, that like to be engaged in discussions, and clearly also what we saw a lot of employees that are passionate about your brand. So it's not just that they're working in a store, any store. It is your store because they love your brand. So they are the extension of your brand. And I think that to those of you who are related to HR or recruitment, that is certainly going to be a discussion about how do you find these people, how do you train them, how do you help them engage in the brand and give them a value of participating in the value creation and also in the brand building, because they're certainly really, really important. And then one of the very interesting stores that we visited was Sephora. We have the stores in Copenhagen as well and in other parts of Denmark, so you might have a chance to see this. They have captured some of the essence of what we saw. They have what they call an innovation lab in the store, meaning that they test things on the run. And I think that was one of the other conclusions that I personally took with me, that was, you don't have to finish your idea before you test it. You can test it in beta versions. You can test it in early stages to see how customers react to it and to see how they also respond to the value that you try to match. And we actually visited a store, not Sephora, but another one, which was called Beta. And Beta is actually a store, or it's a retail chain, that sells beta versions of products. So it's actually testing products live in front of customers that are commercially interested in buying it. But in Sephora, there was a number of opportunities to actually give very, very personalized advice, not only in terms of what colors would fit your face, what colors would fit what type of glasses that you might have on, but it could also be all the way down to skin type. So when we analyze your skin type, what kind of creams and powders or whatever will be good for you? What should you stay away from? So it's not just selling stuff, it's actually also giving advice. And it's giving advice that is very personalized. And I think I should say that when we were there, the people we met were extremely proud of the store that they were working in. It was not just a Sephora employee. It was a person that was helping other people to look good. And the way they spoke about what they did and the purpose why they went to work was actually that they love to be around happy people, but they also love to be around people that learn stuff and actually were able to move further and say, I got something with me I didn't expect. So this almost self-actualization and this social impact, I mean, if you can do that with cosmetics, you can do that with a lot of things. Right? So that passion was certainly something that we saw specifically there, but also again, it might be part of the American experience, not only, but we saw this, and it was not forced in any way or shape. As such.
Maybe just add an experience from the store. They mentioned that when they are hiring people, one of the questions in their application form is, have you ever done a performance? In a school play, in everyday life, in a theater, amateur, professional, no matter what, because they wanted to make sure that the people facing customers were comfortable in performing. And they brought it to the extent that employees are not on the floor, they're on stage, they're not employees, they were actors. So they've kind of repositioned the whole vocabulary around.
For those of you who would like to go down that line, there's what Heidi is tipping into is the whole service thinking, classical in terms of how Disney would do things and stuff. But there's a lot to be learned, because if we are moving from shops where we just sell stuff to interactions with customers, then your employees will become a vital part of your brand. And if they don't live your brand, they will live somebody else's brand. And that's probably not interesting in your store. So the key here is actually go back and say, how can we test people for the things that we like to? And I think the Sephora example is one that shows you that you can actually look for behavior, actual behavior right now, or behavior in the past, that might give you suggestions to what kind of person am I standing in front of. And Disney does this in many ways. One of the shapes they have is that, a Disneyland park is supposed to be clean. So if we walk you on the way to the interview by a waste basket, and there's something next to the basket, and you don't pick it up, all right, then we might have to teach you to pick it up, as opposed to those who naturally just bend down and take it. So it's behavior which is the key here. I think this is one of the places where we saw this idea of service as a business model showing up and really becoming a very, very interesting perspective. Because it's one of the places where the interface on a screen still have a far way to go, but where human-based in-store environments can still do something which is different. So the service idea, and this is actually pictures from the beta store, where you can see sort of different things on display. It's just one product at a time, so it's really focused, and you can actually, when you stand there alone, you can push a button so you can get a story, the originator's story about the product. You can get some ideas to how to use it, and if that is not enough, you can engage in a dialogue with the staff in store, then are more than willing to help you and even test it. We saw bikes on display in one of the stores, and I don't know when you have last been in a situation where if you're going to, how is it to ride? Well, you can sit on it, we can hold the bike. In this particular example, well, why don't you take a tour around the block? No. What? Do you trust me to do that? Sure. By the way, all the bikes are GPS mounted, so. But the perspective of actually giving you this experience that, of course, we're willing and help to test it as we go. From salesperson to trusted advisor, that I actually go in and say, Mogens, I know you're very fond of those glasses, but to be honest, I think you should do something else. Or to go in and to say, with that head shape, it might be something different. And this idea of being trusted advisor in the sense that I'm not trying necessarily to sell you. So we also overheard examples in some of the stores that where customers were asking for for an alternative, and the employee saying, if I were you, I wouldn't go down that route. I would choose something else. It's not, you're not going to be happy. Trust me. But I can give you a tester, so you can take it with you home and then come back in a few days and then see how it is. The idea about customization is something that we saw coming up several times, of actually saying we can actually help you with solutions that fits exactly to you. And that would be no matter whether we were speaking about clothing. We also saw it in cosmetics. We saw it in sports equipment, etc. So it's something that you take for granted. In other words, you expect that this is the case. And without saying that this is too marvelous, then I think it might be interesting to go out into a Danish retailer setting and say something about, I'd like it customized to me. How fast can you do it? And this link that we also spoke about just before, about the link to service or service management, came also back to the idea that if you have bad experiences in the stores, it is a poor management effort. So as the management is not supporting the employees in helping them to look good or setting them up for success, then we certainly do have an issue in terms of store experience, which is the only place where you can differentiate, by the way.
Would you elaborate a little bit about the service as a business model for with the business case? So with the beta store, the brands paid for
Display?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're not, as a store, making money on the actual product?
No.
Or how was it?
Yeah, basically the beta store was a renting, it was a mini mall, in the sense that you as an individual supplier would rent a little bit space where you can actually present your product. You're obliged to give the staff training, so they know what actually is sold, and you will be also giving some opportunities to in the store that the managers or the staff will hand out samples of some of your products, because it is a testing ground. The whole idea is gathering information about how do people see this as such. And it's a quite interesting concept, because every store is individual in terms of what kind of products they carry. So it's not like a standardized retail store where we have a concept that we repeat, but actually that we adapt to the neighborhood in which we saw it. And I think that was another one that we also saw in several of the chains that we visited. They spoke about setting their managers free to adapt to local conditions in terms of ethnicity or age or whatever it could be. So that was certainly some of these places. Evelyn is one of the companies that's trying to give you a full set of information about the supply chain. And this idea about being a good citizen, this idea about being a non-abusive company in any way and shape and form is something that we could see creeping in, especially into the fashion industry. But I think it's fair to say that we saw it also at a cafe, where there were a special cafe that actually was built on the idea that we help people back to life. In this case, ex-convicts. But again, as you might have heard a few times when I've been speaking about some of these companies, they are always working with a higher purpose. You know, I'm helping you to become more attractive. I'm helping you to have no skin problems. I'm helping you to get back to life. The purpose is fairly big and it's fairly high level, which means that it's something that quite a lot of people can buy into and say, you know, I'd like to take part of this. So you are speaking back to the Amazon pyramid, speaking very much to the social impact and also to the emotions that actually makes you decide where to go and how to do things. Evelyn again was a picture of a place of where you can actually see on the wall. There would be pictures from where do we manufacture our goods, and there were, I think in some instances, there were live streaming from the factories, so you can actually see what's going on right now in this specific factory. As an attempt to say, we have nothing to hide and we'd like to share everything we have with you. And I think that perspective was kind of quite interesting.
But also maybe elaborate that Everlane started as an online platform and are now moving vastly into physical space.
Might just pause on that one just for a minute, because that's, as we've seen in many instances, that we've seen companies moving from one platform to another one. What we're seeing in a number of online retailers that are actually establishing themselves as physical entities. I think the biggest joke of them all is Amazon Books. I mean, they took the bookstores out of play, and now they're reinventing them and coming back. But Amazon is interesting in testing again, and a lot of what they do is actually just testing how do people respond to this. You know, is this a way to do things? The last thing that they have opened is the Amazon 4-star stores that you might have heard of, where you can buy products that have a customer rating of 4.4 or more in the stores. So that's all you can buy there, based on your customers, other customers. Right? So, this good citizenship is something that was underlined again and again, but also the idea that if you're not existing in social media, you don't exist. We got a different set of numbers on how many of the customer journeys that start on mobile, but I think that the perspective here is that more than 50% of searches start on mobile, meaning that if you're not accessible via mobile apps, Instagram for example, then basically you're not there. So citizenship, transparency, and then this idea that, this was a quote from one of the speakers, retail has to mimic biology. In other words, the survival of the most adaptable, not necessarily the strongest. The one that is actually able to change as we go along, and is able to test new things, not necessarily being finished. One was certainly one of them. Technology is here for good, so it's like the internet, it's probably not going to go away, but it can be used in many shapes and forms. And there's no doubt that technology will not just be confined to the stores. We will also be seeing how can technology be taken into the customers' homes, how can technology be used to perhaps take your wardrobe, take pictures of what are your favorite clothes, and then send that to the store, and then they will come back to you with a set of suggestions of what are you missing, how could you actually improve your usability of your wardrobe. So tech is here to assist in many, many ways. It's also a question of that sensors are becoming so cheap, so we are beginning now to see that we can actually help you develop really intelligent clothes that will adapt to the surroundings and either close the surface or become breathable depending on the weather around you, etc. So don't see tech as something that is an IT question. This is an operation question. So IT here is important in terms of where can it help us, where can technology help us either improve customization, help us recognize customers, help us know what they have been accessing their purchasing history, or even trying to figure out, can we predict their next move based on other customers have done so and so. You know the drill from Amazon. If you look at a particular piece of music or book, then you will get suggestions to other people also liked or also looked at. It's the kind of same thing that we're looking at here. But there is a number of retailers that actually is working on how to predict your next move, your next purchase, or when is your existing, in my case, shirts, going to wear out. Well, if we know that you are ordering new shirts on a regular basis, we might be able to give you a better deal up front, because we can say to you, we know that you do this with 4 months intervals. Now we can suggest to maybe if we can prove that to 3.5 months, we can sell you more over time. But we can also make you look better because your shirts are not going to wear out. So using analytics to predict is something that we saw quite a lot of things. And the last thing that I just mentioned here, which is actually relating here to this customer journey, is the use of personas or segments in customer journeys. Trying to figure out what kind of value can we create for the customer during the journey, and will there be customer groups where we will have difficulties creating value and thereby not telling them that they are welcome. So getting this dialogue between where then can we create value and where is it that we destroy value to avoid the last and improve the first. That is something that most of the retailers we met spoke a lot about, focusing in on this whole idea about making the value proposition as strong as possible for those we fit to. So to speak. Yeah.
All right. So overall, 3 takeaway: take as a driver, service as a business model, and the physical store having a new place in the customer journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you elaborate, or maybe your thoughts and the conclusions after a trip? If you're a small retailer in the Danish retail space today, what is some of the things that you should start doing or stop doing?
Well, I think first of all, at sort of the more philosophical level, it is stop thinking like the store as a nicely designed, nicely lit storage facility. Figure out how we can use the space to engage with your customers, and to figure out how can you help your customers engage with other customers. So how can you become a hub or a meeting place where the value created is something which is facilitated by you, but not necessarily created by you alone. So that calls for looking at how do you actually make the decoration of your store, how do you make things actually work inside, how do you use the space. And the next thing I would be looking at is how would I like my employees to work with customers. There's a lot of opportunities out there to get courses and everything else, but I think the basic situation here is how can I make my staff happy serving customers, and what kind of customer takeaway would I like my customers to have when they leave. So what would they say about me when they leave, and the experience with the brand.
So that being a smaller retail,
Yeah.
if we move up the ladder a little bit and say, now I'm a bigger retail,
Yeah.
I might be a chain, I have several stores.
Yes.
You talked a little bit about this, getting the more local feel.
Yeah. I think the headline would be set your store managers free. Forget this standardized approach that you that now we got the concept right, and now we exploit it to the last penny. The perspective here is to let the stores explore what opportunities they can fulfill in the local community, because there will be opportunities locally to change concepts, perhaps to invite local stakeholders of different kinds, and actually try to figure out, how can we play a different role? Should we open our stores once in a while for the community? Can we assist in, if I'm in clothing, can we assist in gathering used clothes and make swapping days in front of the store or in our warehouse that is empty now, or whatever could we do? So not just being a store, but actually being an active participant in the local community.
And then the last target group I want to address is the brands. What if I'm a brand and I don't have my own retail? I'm very dependent on wholesale. I'm very dependent on somebody being my spokesperson out there. How did you hear some of the brands that were on the trip talking about retail from their point of view?
Well, they spoke about retail in two ways. And they spoke about it partly being disappointed in some ways, but also seeing a lot of opportunities to help retail, to assist retailers. And quite a lot of them, I think, realized that they were not very good, the brands that is. They were not very good at telling the story in a way so it could be easily retold. So if you try to become the brand and people don't get the story, then I think that's a major issue. And then invite retailer staff to your facilities. Show them what it is. Get them to know you. I mean, even if you're a small brand, behind every brand there's a personality. Get that personality up there and being alive and kicking.
Very good. All right. So thank you for listening in. We were a few people in the room, but thank you for sharing the thoughts, Mogens. We will send out slides, presentations. If you have questions,
or if other things comes up, you're more than welcome to reach out. But I would also encourage that you might reach out to some of the companies participated in the trip. Because once in a while, it's always good to get an expert on the field to talk about this issue, but maybe it might be a good case for you to invite one of the brands instead for them to share how did they experience this inspiration trip and gain knowledge from that and implemented that. All right. Well, thank you all for paying attention. Have a good afternoon.